Cool. Well, let's just jump into it. So how'd you get into the industry? Was you family members, parents in the industry, or how'd that happen?
No, no. So I don't have any experience besides the last 4 years of running the store um, in the business. My wife and I own a yoga studio on the major like business corridor right in our neighborhood,
Okay.
and there was our local beer store across the street from the yoga studio, and her getting out of corporate America was kind of like she's like, oh, let me try to do something on my own. And I was still still in that world,
Okay.
just contributing to the corporate churn a bit, and wanted my own escape of sorts because she was really living a fulfilled life, hard life. Small business life is tough for sure, but
Totally.
as a yoga studio owner, so we the store that I bought my beer in, the owners there had owned it for about 10 years and just befriended them over time being a customer, and eventually learned that they were interested in potentially selling their store.
Cool.
So, you know, I I had to convince the owner of the store to let me come and chat with him about it and shadow him. He was very skeptical to sell it. He wanted to sell it, but he was skeptical to sell it. It was a very odd situation. The folks that owned it before me and my wife were Cambodian immigrants, true like American dream story. Came here with absolutely nothing,
Wow.
and eventually owned, 30 years later, owned this beer store in this not great neighborhood, which the neighborhood has been gentrifying, good or bad. But they bought the store, when it was, plate glass windows and very traditional transactional inner city beer store.
Sure.
Not lots of craft in there, really just like domestics, cheaper pounders, and things like that. Now they
Sure.
made a wonderful life for themselves, and they ran that store so efficiently, probably more efficiently than I can ever do it because they were willing to work every hour of every day. So they had tried to sell it a couple times, and it had fallen through. And I didn't really know why that happened, but um, he eventually let me shadow. So I would this is before I had kids. So I'd come home from work, I'd go to the beer store, I'd sit in the office with him, the plate glass window office, and
Yeah.
I would just observe, and we would chat. And I did that for about 18 months. And then he
Wow.
finally he finally offered me a beer and said, "You want to have a beer?" So I had my first beer with him after 18 months, and he said, "I think I'm willing to sell the store to
Wow.
you." Yeah, so it was really for me, to be honest with you, it was my wife and I are really entrenched in the community in our neighborhood. So we have this
Okay.
yoga studio, which is a very community focused type of business. Our kids go to school down the street. Um, we we I didn't work very far from there already.
Okay.
Um, you know, this is just kind of like this is our world. Philadelphia is like a lot of towns, a lot of cities out there, where it's a city of neighborhoods, right? You know the people that are walking around, and we just love the idea of kind of like being small business owners in our neighborhood and providing a service that we feel is essential. Beer
Yeah.
is a wonderful service, and yoga is a
Totally.
pretty cool thing too. So that's really how it came to be. I just sat in the office with him. Eventually, he agreed to sell it to me, and it took us a while to actually do the transaction, but eventually we got through that as well. So it's been probably at this point like a 7 year journey. We've only owned the store for about 4 years. It took another year after I sat in the store with him for a while to actually close on the business.
Okay. Yeah.
And then we've been running it since 2019.
I was
I guess
trying to make the years, the math work with, like you said, you started shadowing him before you had kids, but now your kids are going to school. I was just like, how's that?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was
That
like
makes sense.
2017 when I was like first chatting with him. So I
Yeah.
sat in the store for a year and a half, and then we started, working on the transaction in like 2018 and closed in 2019. Um, so yeah, um,
Man.
it was a wild ride to get it. Like, listen, here's the thing: I mean, they don't make these licenses anymore, right? Like
Right.
the state isn't like, okay, here's all the new import and distributor licenses that are available in the state. This is just like many other places in the country
Yeah.
where these licenses exist, and you're either gonna you're going to buy them from somebody, or somebody's going to go out of business, or somehow you stumble upon it and you're
Yeah.
right place, right time. So, you know, it's a little combination of all that stuff, little stick to itiveness, you know,
Yeah,
saving
that's
enough
some
money,
dedication.
squirreling away, yeah, squirreling away enough dollars to be able to do it. And, um, you know, it's been a good ride. I mean, it was a rough go of it in the beginning there, but should only help strengthen the story. I like to tell that story to my teammates and my new employees who come on board. Like, hey, this
Yeah,
wasn't just like, you know, something we just like stepped into. We hustled for this too. So
for
yeah.
sure. What was the corporate job that you had before? Like, where are you coming from? What world?
Yeah, I was in IT healthcare consulting. So essentially, I worked for a company that installed electronic health records in hospitals. So
Okay.
very operations heavy, project management type work. So I had
Okay.
a team of folks that we would travel around the country and install these software systems. So that's really where
Okay.
like the guts of my skill set lie, which is, you know, interactions individually with people. So a human interface. And then I'm techie enough where I know enough to be dangerous on the tech side and focused primarily on operations. You know, when you talk to me about sales and marketing and, you know, some of the other like business school skills, that's not me. I didn't go to
Hmm.
business school. Um,
Right.
so a lot of that stuff has come over time. So I really lean heavily on just the operational side, which is, it suits me well for the business because it's a very operations heavy business. You know,
Totally.
inventory in, inventory out, all the little systems and processes you need just to like get a product logistically from point A to point B.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of the background, you know, for me professionally. I'm literally
Right.
just a beer enthusiast, not a beer. Was never in the beer industry, never in the beverage industry,
Okay.
barely in retail. I mean, worked a retail job as a kid, you know,
Right.
which
Yeah.
I, you know, citing a job I had when I was 14 probably isn't really citing a job.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I bet a bunch of people who are looking at this are in the same
sure,
exact boat because we
sure,
all did
sure.
that. Um, so could you talk about just describe the store for a few minutes? Like you're talking about your inventory, like what do you guys have in terms of SKUs and that
Yeah,
kind of stuff?
yeah, sure. So you know, our store has been around since 1955. It's called Stones. It's been on the same corner that whole time.
Hmm.
So several generations of folks have owned it. I think we're the fourth or fifth owners. So a lot of folks in our area know the store relatively well because they used to come there as kids. Their parents would bring them, and now they live in the neighborhood and they come to the
Right.
store. Nobody really escapes Philadelphia, by the way. Like if you live here, you kind of like always stay here. But I'm sure people can say that about lots of places in the country. But
Yeah.
it's a in Pennsylvania, it's a unique situation because Pennsylvania beer distributors up until 2016 is the only place you could buy beer in the state.
Hmm.
There was no beer in grocery stores. I mean, you could buy a to go beer maybe from a bar, but there was really no other competition. So our store traditionally for all those years since 1955 has been a retail operation primarily. Now we do have an import and distributor's license, which allows us to you know, sign contracts with brands for exclusive distribution rights in the state. But up until we bought the store, that part of the license wasn't utilized at all. It was
Hmm.
a very traditional Philadelphia beer distributor. Like, if I can paint the picture for the folks potentially listening, you know, imagine fencing, wire fencing, barbed wire, a big garage door, you know, cracked up sidewalk, really
Right.
dusty. Like as much as you might want to clean it, you can't clean it. The building is older than the business was. Um, no air, no heat. You know,
So the
it
beer's not
was
cold,
no
right?
bad for beer, bad for people all
Yeah.
around. You know, had a lot of a long way to go, but I'll tell you, it was beloved in the neighborhood. I
Okay.
don't exactly know why, but there's something about it that was like a charming something charming about it. Maybe just the longevity it had or whatnot. But I knew that it needed a lot of love because I was a consumer there. So the store itself now is still primarily a retail operation. We have expanded the SKUs like tremendously. I think when I bought the store, we had about 200. We have 1,000 products now.
Okay.
We're We're split pretty evenly, like craft and domestic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Definitely one of the better craft stores in the city
Okay.
from a selection point of view. But there's a lot of really solid stores in Philly. I mean, it's a big city, one of the
Right.
bigger beer markets. So, like my colleagues who are in the industry, my competition in the city, we all have like pretty good stuff,
Yeah.
and we have some good other big wholesalers around here that are pretty good.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of SKUs, um, which you know, good thing and bad thing. Good thing overall, I'd say. You want to have a lot of selection in beer for sure because when we compare to grocery and some other smaller shops, selection usually helps people win out or helps us win out a little bit. You
Totally.
want to make an efficient. You want to make an efficient beer trip. You know, you're popping into a
Yeah.
store and go, I know they're going to have this, and then they don't have it.
That
We have most
sucks.
of what most people want.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, primarily retail, but we've recently expanded a good bit into the wholesale side in the last 2 years. So we're serving restaurants, bars, venues, and then even folks without licenses, so nonprofits, universities, schools,
Interesting.
um, office buildings, folks that just need general beverage services too,
Yeah.
or
So how
people
did
who
you,
do want. Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I was gonna say, how did you like, how do you even find that niche, that business opportunity? Like that's not something most people are thinking. Like, how do you find it? How'd you know about it? Did somebody
yeah.
contact you and they're like, hey, we need beers for our nonprofit. We need beers for our office. Like, were they calling you?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when we took over the store, we did the store had been there so long that it did have some legacy customers that were like this. Like we would get a call from a local university who has a food and beverage department and they put on happy hours for like professors. I
For
mean,
the
I would never
archaeology
have,
department. Yeah.
right. How would I have ever found? There's no way I would have found that out, right? Like no sales rep is going to unearth that one.
Yeah.
So we use that example as a model and go, all right, well, maybe there's other food and bev at other universities. Okay. So now we have a
Yeah.
place to like kind of begin. So it's like anything else. I mean, all the business owners that are on this call, they might stumble upon one opportunity and then realize that, this is probably something that exists in my industry.
Totally.
So that's really how it came to be. Restaurants and bars are, pretty obvious for us, except we didn't really know how to do it. We
Right.
know how to do it now, well enough, but long way to go. I mean, some of our competition here in the city has been at this. Our store's been around since '55, but we've been a retail shop. We've had wholesalers in our region since the '20s, so
Yeah.
their infrastructure is, a lot different than us. We got a long way to go to be able to compete on their size. Not that we would want
Right.
to, but yeah, so yeah, expanded into wholesale for serving those folks, and then also did expanded into retail delivery, which
Mm-hmm.
is a major gap in the city for sure. There's like
Okay.
a couple players, so for us that was like an obvious thing that I wanted to make sure we got into. I mean, I'm making a bet there that beer is going to fall the rest of the way. All of our other consumer goods are falling. I mean, it's a consumer good, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think something like 0.5% of all alcohol is delivered to your door in the states. Of all the alcohol that's sold, 0.5%. I mean, that is
Yeah. That's
the
comically
runway
low.
there
Yeah.
feels big. So,
Was there was there a law
our infrastructure is in
change?
place to do it.
Was there a law
Yes,
change for you guys around COVID that
yeah.
made it possible?
No, it was possible for that. It's just that it's really challenging in Pennsylvania because you can't have a third party do it.
So
Like for
you have
example,
to
if you're in
pay
that,
for it. Okay.
you need your own staff. You
Yeah.
need you need your people to do the driving. As
Yeah.
opposed to like if you're in Manhattan, there's services like Uber Eats and
A
DoorDash
bunch of
that
other ones. Yeah, we were looking at them. Yeah.
that contract with folks like me, and they do the delivery for you. So, no overhead for you, no employee management. You're not paying
No training, no
any of the training, no labor.
insurance.
There's
Yeah.
right. I mean, you add up that overhead, and it makes it really challenging. But for me, it was I think worth the bet initially. I mean, it's still worth it now because we've really learned a lot over the last couple of years on how to do it well. And like anything else, every other business owner goes through. Like you start a new process, you start a new service, you stumble, fall,
Mm-hmm.
apologies, free this. Oh, I'm so sorry. Please,
Right.
we'll redeliver at no cost. I mean, you just try to absorb that as best you can, work through the process, and make sure that it's tighter as you go. And at this point, we've done tens of thousands of deliveries, so we've got enough reps under our belt where we kind of get it. But it took several models to get there, and I'm sure it'll adjust again. But for the most part, it's pretty solid. Now, we're not ever probably going to compete on the with the scale of some of the really bigger delivery providers that have major venture capital money.
Hmm.
But that's okay. That's not where we need to be. We're
Yeah.
serving a different type of customer
Yeah.
from a delivery point of view, than some of those bigger players.
Yeah. You've talked, you mentioned it's come up, I guess, a couple of times so far when we're talking, like,
Sure,
you're talking about like that competitor, but they're not even really your competitor because you don't want to like do that's not who you guys are. You also mentioned
sure,
it when you're or like competitor, the idea of a competitor when you were talking about distributors like bar and restaurant relationships and stuff like that. I guess I'm
sure.
curious what your aspirations for the store are 5 years, 10 years from now. Like you're getting into these new lanes.
Yeah.
So what do you see Stones turning into? Where do you want to be?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'll be really honest about it too. The first 4 years, we bought the store in 2019, so April of 2019. So, give me 9 months, and I'm just learning the store. I'm
Yeah,
learning, and we're changing lots of things. And then COVID hit,
I had no
so
idea it was
now,
that. Yeah, I guess.
yeah, so then we're in COVID. So now I'm standing up a delivery team and standing up a website for the first time. This is not I've never done any of this. This is the same story that a million business owners that are watching this are probably going to have,
Yeah,
right? You start a bar, you start a restaurant, and you go, I work in a restaurant, I can figure it out. Or you have some friends that can potentially help you, but you
right.
got your way through it and you figure it out. And then more recently, our landlord actually demolished the building that we've been in, and we had to relocate. And now we're going to be moving back to the same location we were in after the landlord rebuilds the building. So we've had a very odd first 4 years of business,
No kidding.
incredibly odd. Yeah. So when you ask about like what do we see, where do we see Stones in 5 years, I haven't actually spent that much time figuring it out, to be honest with you. I have been like, okay, how do I run payroll? All
Yeah.
right, how do I stand up a delivery team? Okay, how do we take product photos? How do we take 1,000 product photos and get them up onto a website?
Yep.
That's been a lot of my life in these
Hmm.
last 4 years. Now, I do have some general thoughts, though. This won't be the cleanest vision or mission of the
Totally.
store. But I think what I'd like to see is, we're moving into a space that's going to be fit out and it'll be new.
Okay.
So, one, I just kind of need to step back into this mainstay that we've been for a long time as kind of a core neighborhood beer store.
Hmm.
Ultimately, like that's at our core what we are. That's what I want us to be. I love the idea of like knowing the people that shop in the store. I love seeing my neighbors when I'm like sitting outside and eating with my family and somebody comes by and knows me from the store. Like that is the core of who we are. That is really what our staff is all about too. Like
Hmm.
our team, most of them bike there or they walk there. Most of them are young professionals that are like cutting their teeth in the real world. So I get to impart the little knowledge I have about, you know, growing up and, you know, being a professional. Um, and we made a commitment, right? So we have a couple brands now that we represent exclusively in Philadelphia and our four surrounding counties. We made a commitment to those brands to actually keep the portfolio of brands that we sell relatively small. So
Okay.
I actually like the idea of not being obsessed with growth as a business owner. I like
Hmm.
I like seeing us get to a point where we have, my staff has like a really positive, joyful existence working at Stones, no matter how long that may be. Our consumers that walk in the door and buy beer at the store really love the fact and are proud of the fact that they're shopping at Stones, that our
Hmm.
brands that we represent feel like, okay, the bill of goods that Nick sold me when he said, we can do this for you, is holding true. And in 5 years, we don't have 100 brands that we rep, and then our sales rep is only going to push, you
Right.
know, the
No
one
attention
brewery
on
that's
them.
got enough money. Yeah, like most of those brands said to me, we want to choose a retailer or a wholesaler that really cares about us and that knows
Hmm.
us and that can talk about our story. I want to stay true to that.
Right.
I love the idea of like being this nimble, small to medium sized split shop retailer, wholesaler that can kind of flex and move as the industry moves, and also like serve both restaurants, bars, venues,
Mm-hmm.
all these other universities and these odd little, one-off
Right.
companies that need that kind of beverage support, but also really like groom and grow and have the team that works at Stones leave there being like, I'm a better person because I work there.
Nice.
So there's some version of that, and
Yeah.
one day I'll have a true vision, I think. But some version of what I just described sounds great to me. And by the way, I live like 5 blocks from the store, so for
Okay.
us, my wife and I, like this is a lifestyle play, right? Like I want to enjoy what I'm doing, but I also love the fact that I can just like stroll over to work
Yeah.
and be really proud of like the store that we have and the community that we serve.
Mm-hmm.
That's the long and the short of it, I'd
Yeah. I mean, that's all of it sounds admirable for
say.
sure.
Thanks, appreciate
I
that.
love the
Yeah,
lifestyle. I love the lifestyle play. I just had
yeah.
my first kid almost, I guess, 11
Congratulations,
months ago now. I
congratulations.
I was with him this morning. He's a joy.
Very
But yeah,
cool.
the more time that you can spend, like what's the point of all this? You know what I mean? If
Yeah, like I think I'm going to be 40 in a couple months. So,
Hmm,
early 20s where maybe like a lot of people's early 20s were really focused on pursuit. I'm very ambitious, really want to try to achieve something. I'm not really sure what it is.
yeah.
And then, you have kids, I have a wife. I realize the people around me are what make me happy.
Hmm.
And the people that are around me are the people that shop at the store in the community,
Yeah.
the people that are my staff that are part of the team that are like telling me, how much they're learning by working at Stones, which always surprises them, right?
Yeah.
It's a beer store. Most people take the job and they think, all right, this is a holdover for 6 months. And then all of a sudden they're there 3 years and they're the assistant GM. And
Right.
that stuff is like incredibly rewarding to me. That's the stuff that like makes my hair stand up. And it's like, I mean, that's all I need. And this business, by the way, is a very much like you make a living business. This isn't,
Hmm.
the margins are thin. This is what I would have been paying myself if I was, you know, make in corporate America or less.
Right.
So like it is truly about like, all right, what's gonna keep the joy flowing, and I don't ever want to have a Sunday scary again.